The sound of the dining room that night was too perfect, crystal clinking, knives slicing through soft meat, the steady hum of polite conversation. It was the kind of noise people make when they want to sound like a family. From where I sat, at the far end of the table, it felt like watching a scene I didn't belong to. Miranda Rowan sat at the head, glowing under the chandelier, a woman who had perfected the art of elegance. Her emerald dress caught the light every time she lifted her glass, and her smile curved just right, a smile that could bless or destroy, depending on who it was aimed at. That night, it wasn't aimed at me. "Family," she said, raising her glass. "That's what tonight is all about." Her voice had the warmth of a winter fireplace, the kind you can't touch because it burns. Everyone echoed her to "family," and the sound filled the high-ceilinged room. I lifted my glass too, half a beat late. The red wine reflected the golden lights from the tree behind her, and for a second I saw my own face in it, calm, polite, unreadable. Daniel, my husband, sat beside her. His suit fit perfectly, his tie chosen by her, his smile directed toward her. He didn't look my way, not once. 6 years of marriage had trained him to avoid the moments when he should have spoken up. Tonight was just another one of them. "Clara, tell us about the campaign," Miranda said, leaning forward with genuine interest. Clara, the oldest daughter, was everything Miranda loved: articulate, blonde, confident. Her PR firm had just won an award, and she talked about it with a glow that demanded applause. Miranda gave it, of course, with that little clap of manicured hands. "Brilliant, darling. You always make me proud." I smiled faintly, though no one was looking at me. June, the younger sister, laughed and chimed in about a new art gallery she was working with. Even that somehow earned more attention than I ever did. Dinner went on with the same rhythm. Compliments, laughter, little stories that excluded me neatly as if rehearsed. I knew this dance too well. The first few years I tried to join. I brought desserts, made polite jokes, asked about their work. Miranda always found a way to silence me with kindness. "Oh, that's sweet, dear. You probably wouldn't understand the financial side." And Daniel, like a well-trained spectator, would just smile awkwardly and sip his wine. Tonight, though, I wasn't there to beg for space. I was there to end something. Miranda tapped her spoon gently against her glass, drawing everyone's attention. "Well," she said, eyes sparkling. "Before dessert, I thought we could exchange gifts. Nothing big, of course, just gestures of love." She turned to Daniel first. "For my son, the heart of this family." She handed him a small box wrapped in gold. Inside was a limited edition watch, sleek, silver, and far too expensive to call a gesture. Daniel smiled, kissed her cheek. "You shouldn't have, Mom." "Oh, please, you deserve it." Then came Clara. She got a luxury resort voucher, 2 nights for 2. June got diamond earrings, tiny but brilliant. Each gift came with laughter, hugs, the whole theater of affection. I sat quietly, my hands folded on the tablecloth. When Miranda reached the end of the line, she looked around the table and then at me, her smile bright and empty. "Oh my, did I forget someone?" The words floated across the table like perfume, sweet and poisonous. Daniel's fork paused halfway. Clara looked down. June covered her mouth, pretending to adjust her lipstick. I felt the sting in my chest, the familiar one I'd learned to disguise. 6 Christmases, 6 different ways to remind me that I didn't belong. I could have stayed silent, smiled, waited for the night to end like I always did. But not this time. I set my wineglass down gently. "It's all right," I said, my voice steady. "I actually brought something for you instead." The air shifted. Miranda blinked, her confidence flickering for the first time. "Oh, Hadley, you didn't have to." "I know," I said, "but I wanted to." I reached for the small box beside my chair, silver paper, red ribbon, elegant enough to match the rest of the evening. It caught the light as I placed it in front of her. Her hands hovered above it like she was afraid it might bite. "What's this?" she asked. "A little Christmas gift," I said. "Something personal." Daniel's tone sharpened. "Hadley, can this wait until after dinner?" I looked at him and smiled softly. "No, this is the right time." The conversation around us died completely. Even the sound of the fireplace seemed to fade. Miranda unwrapped the paper with deliberate grace, careful not to tear it. She opened the box, paused, frowned. Inside wasn't jewelry, perfume, or anything wrapped in satin. It was a small stack of printed papers, neatly clipped together. Her smile froze. "What is this?" I leaned forward slightly. "Something you forgot to report in your annual audit." Clara's eyes widened. "Mom," Daniel frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Miranda laughed, a light, practiced sound. "Oh, please, this must be a misunderstanding." But I saw it, the tremor in her fingers, the way her pupils tightened. She knew exactly what she was looking at. "I've spent a few weeks helping Clara organize digital press kits," I said calmly. Your foundation's public reports were part of it. You really should secure your shared drives better. Daniel's voice rose. Hadley, what the hell? 3 years, I continued, cutting him off. 3 years of unreported transfers from the Rowan Foundation to private accounts in the Cayman Islands. One of those accounts is under the name Clara J. Rowan. I assume she didn't open it herself. Clara's face drained of color. I never, Mom, Miranda's jaw tightened. You don't understand the context. Oh, I understand enough, I said softly. You took donation money and hid it. You used your daughter's names. And you've been doing it while preaching about integrity and service at every charity gala in Seattle. The air was thick enough to choke on. Miranda's fork clattered to the table. Daniel's voice came out hoarse. Hadley, stop, you can't. I met his eyes for the first time that night. I can, and I just did. Miranda stared at the papers as if the ink might rearrange itself into something kind. She turned one page, then another. Her hand shook almost invisibly. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its velvet coat. You have no idea what you're accusing me of, she said. I kept my tone even. I am not accusing, I am reading. Page 2, line 7. Transfer routed through a shell vendor. The address belongs to a mailbox store. The lease is in your driver's maiden name. That is a lovely touch. Clara whispered. I never opened an account. June took her hand under the table. The gesture was small, frightened, real. Daniel rose from his chair so quickly it scraped the floor. Enough, he said. We are not doing this tonight. I looked up at him. We already are. Miranda lifted her chin. The light caught her pearls. She was ready for a performance. You want attention, Hadley, you always have. But to smear this family in our own home, on Christmas Eve, I felt something inside me settle. This is not about attention, I said. This is about the people who gave their savings because they believed your speeches. It is about your husband. It is about your children. It is about the truth you traded for applause. Her eyes flashed. You do not speak for my family. Then let them speak, I said, and turned to Daniel. Ask her if the transfers exist. Daniel looked at Miranda like a child begging a parent to make thunder stop. Mom, he whispered, tell me there is a simple explanation. Miranda opened her mouth, but the answer did not come. The room heard the silence. It was louder than a confession. Harold pushed his chair back. He had said almost nothing all night. He was a quiet man, the kind who carried rooms with simple presence. His napkin lay on the table like a white flag. He stood to full height, then faltered. His hand moved to his chest. Harold, Miranda said, but it sounded like a line she had forgotten to rehearse. He took one step. The second step failed him. His body leaned forward, met the table, then the floor. Everything happened at once. Clara screamed. June grabbed for the phone with clumsy fingers. Daniel ran around the table, knocking over a chair. Miranda froze in a pose that looked like prayer but felt like shock without a soul. I was already beside Harold. Sir, can you hear me? I said, kneeling. His breath came shallow. His eyes were open but far away. Call emergency, I said. Give me the address, speak clearly. June repeated the numbers, voice shaking, then followed the operator's questions like a child reciting lesson lines. Miranda dropped to her knees at Harold's shoulder. Her hands hovered but did not land. Oh my God, Harold, please, please. No tears, only sound. I counted his breaths. I watched his color. I spoke softly near his ear. You are not alone, hold on. Help is on the way. Daniel crouched across from me, damaged with fear. He looked at me like I had pulled a trigger. What did you do? He said, his voice breaking. What did you do to this family? I kept my eyes on Harold. I said the truth aloud, Daniel. Your mother did the rest. The sirens came fast. Blue and red slid across the walls and shattered the still life of the tree. Paramedics entered with practiced urgency. They took over the space the way tides take over sand. Sir, can you hear me? Pulse weak. Let us clear a path. We stepped back, chairs shifted. The tablecloth rippled. The papers lay in spilled wine like drowned birds. As they lifted Harold, Miranda found tears at last. She reached for his hand, then for a paramedic's sleeve. You must save him, she said. He is everything. The paramedic nodded without looking at her. We will do our best. They moved him to the stretcher. Clara followed, crying for the first time in years. June clutched her phone like a lifeline and whispered prayers under her breath. Daniel stood rooted, eyes on his father, shoulders on the edge of collapse. Miranda turned to me. Her face was pale. Her voice was a blade wrapped in velvet. This is on you. I met her gaze and felt nothing move inside me. You did this, I said softly. I removed the ribbon. They wheeled Harold out. The night swallowed the siren and gave us back our breathing. Silence returned with a weight you could measure. We stood in the ruin of a perfect room. The tree kept shining like it did not know how to stop. A ceramic angel smiled into a future that no longer existed. Clara wiped her face and stared at the documents again. "Mom," she said, voice flat and clear. "Tell me the truth." Miranda smoothed her dress as if fabric could forgive. "I protected what your father built," she said. "The foundation would have collapsed during the market shifts. I moved funds temporarily to secure our position. I intended to correct it when the time was right." "Then why use my name?" Clara said. "And mine," June whispered. Miranda opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands found a napkin and began to fold it into a perfect square. Daniel faced me now. The shock had hardened into anger. "You could have talked to us in private." "I tried for 6 years," I said. "Every private conversation with your mother becomes a performance by the time it reaches you. She edits truth the way she edits holiday cards." There was only one room that would not bend, this room. "You wanted a scene," he said. "I wanted a witness," I said. "And I wanted you to look at me and see me, just once." He looked away. We followed the ambulance to the hospital. The city lights hovered in the cold like small moons. The streets were almost empty, as if even strangers knew to stay home and hold what they loved. In the waiting room, time stretched thin. Clara paced. June sat with her hands together and stared at the floor. Daniel leaned forward in his chair with his face in his hands. Miranda stood apart next to a tall plant as if framed for a portrait. When she finally approached me, her voice was low enough to be private. "You do not want to be my enemy, Hadley. There are ways to make this go away, for your sake as well as ours." I watched the door to the emergency corridor. I listened for footsteps. "You cannot purchase air after the room has learned to breathe," I said. "It is too late." She took a slow breath. "You will regret this." "I already regret the years I swallowed in order to keep the peace you advertised. I am done being your press release." A doctor entered. He spoke to Daniel first. "Your father is stable for now. We need to keep him overnight and run tests in the morning. He asked for quiet. He asked for honesty." The word hung there. Honesty. Miranda nodded with a composure that belonged to old galas, not to this bright and sterile room. "Thank you, doctor," she said. Clara and June rushed into the corridor when a nurse waved them in one at a time. Daniel stayed seated, as if the chair held him in place. He lifted his eyes to me. "What do you want?" he asked. The words did not accuse now. They simply fell out. "I want my life back," I said. "I want a room where I am not required to disappear in order to be loved. I want you to look at what is true, even if your mother is the one standing in the light." He swallowed. "You could have waited." I shook my head. Waiting was the whole problem. The waiting was a religion here. The miracle never came. We sat without talking for a while. The television in the corner played a loop of winter weather advisories. A volunteer walked past with a tray of tea. I took a cup and felt the heat through the paper. It steadied my hands. When I finally stood, Daniel stood too. "Where are you going?" he said. "Home," I said. "To pack a small bag. I will come back tomorrow to speak with the doctor. Then I will decide the rest." His mouth opened, closed. "Hadley," he said softly, "if you walk out now, I do not know if we can fix this." I looked at him and for a moment saw the boy he used to be, the boy who thought peace was the same as silence. "You cannot fix what you refuse to name," I said. "Learn the word, then call me." I walked to the door and pushed it open. Cold rushed in and wrapped itself around my face. The parking lot lights gleamed on wet pavement. Somewhere a siren faded into a city that had seen 1,000 nights like this one and would forget them by morning. I stood for a moment under the sky and let the air fill me without permission. I did not feel triumphant. I felt clean. Behind me, the automatic doors closed on the waiting room and its quiet prayer. Ahead of me, the dark was not a wall. It was a path. 3 weeks before that dinner, the world still pretended to be normal. Seattle was caught between autumn and winter then, trees half naked, sky the color of aluminum, streets damp with a rain that never quite stopped. I woke to the same routine every day: shower, coffee, silence. Daniel left early as always. He had meetings, deadlines, endless reasons to be elsewhere. When the door closed, I watched the curtains sway in the draft and listened until his car faded down the hill. Only then did the apartment become mine again. The quiet was heavy, but it was honest. No one correcting my tone, no small sighs when I forgot to set the forks in the proper family way. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the clicking of my laptop keys. I worked from home most days, consulting small nonprofits on branding. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough. And maybe, in some sideways way, it reminded me that honesty could still exist somewhere. That week, one of my clients asked for help drafting a press release about donations to the Rowan Foundation. The foundation. Miranda's empire of virtue. She had built it to help women rebuild their lives. At least, that was the slogan printed on every glossy brochure. I had edited a few of those brochures myself back when I still believed that earning her trust was possible. Now, seeing the foundation's name appear on my client's invoice made something inside me hesitate. A tiny frown, a pause in the breath. Out of habit, I opened the foundation's public site to cross-reference the press materials. It looked immaculate: professional photos, reports, letters from donors. I clicked the annual report PDF. Numbers filled the screen, neat columns of revenue and expenses, each section ending in perfect zeros. It was too perfect. Any consultant who deals with accounts knows real books breathe. They stumble, they leave traces. These did not. I searched for a contact email and found a shared Google Drive link for media access. It was open. Careless, arrogant, or both. Inside were folders named by year, and inside those folders, spreadsheets. I told myself I was just checking for a photo credit, but my cursor kept scrolling. Quarterly ledgers, donation summaries, payment records, and then the first odd thing, a column marked beneficiary transfers. There were names, real names, people I recognized from Miranda's events, but one entry caught me. Clara J. Rowan, Operations Support Stipend, $850. I stared at it. Clara worked for a private firm, not the foundation. Why would she receive funds as a beneficiary? Maybe it was a clerical error. Maybe the doubt was a seed, and once a seed knows soil, it grows. That evening, Daniel came home late. His tie was crooked, his eyes half closed. He smelled of wine and restaurant air. I was at the table, my laptop still open. "How was dinner with your mom?" I asked. He shrugged, dropping his coat on a chair. "She was fine. Asked why you didn't come." "I wasn't invited." He paused, then smiled weakly. "You know how she is, she just thinks you prefer quiet nights." That lie had been used so often it had lost its edges. I nodded, closing the laptop. "Sure." He came behind me and kissed the top of my head absent-mindedly. The gesture was habit, not love. "I'll be in the shower," he said. When the water started running, I opened the laptop again. The spreadsheet still waited on the screen like a dare. I copied the link into a new folder on my desktop, then closed everything before I could think too hard. 2 days later, Miranda called. Her voice was the same as always, smooth as glass. "Hadley, darling, could you help with a small PR draft for next week's fundraiser? You're so good with tone." Tone. She always said that. Never content, never truth, just tone. "Of course," I said, because saying no would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. The following afternoon, I went to the foundation office downtown. The receptionist smiled too brightly and handed me a visitor badge. The smell of fresh flowers and expensive coffee hung in the air. Miranda's door was open. She sat behind her desk, typing on a silver laptop, her hair perfect as always. "Hadley, thank you for coming on short notice," she said without looking up. "No problem. I just need you to add some warmth to the press release. Donors like stories, human faces, emotion." I sat opposite her, notebook ready. "Of course. May I look at the financial summary to match the language with the actual projects?" She froze for half a second, then smiled. "Oh, that's not necessary. The numbers are already approved by our accountants." "I understand," I said, writing a note that said not necessary equals hiding something. When I left her office, I didn't go home immediately. I waited in the lobby until she went into a meeting, then walked back up to the communications floor where the assistant kept digital archives. I had helped set up their naming system years ago. I still knew the password. Inside the network drive was a folder called Event Logistics 2021-2023. Buried under photos and invoices were letters to contractors, receipts for venue donations, and a separate sheet with coded labels. One of those codes matched the number I had seen in the beneficiary transfers. I copied everything. As I walked back to my car, the city lights looked different, too bright, too clean. Rain began to fall again, a steady cold rain that felt like truth itself trying to wash the air. I did not sleep that night. The glow of the screen pressed against the dark like a quiet storm. I spread files across our dining table and watched a pattern rise from the mess. Dates, vendors, wire routes, the same handful of shell entities that changed names but not addresses. Every few pages I saw a new version of the same lie. I built a simple ledger in a fresh sheet and began tracing flows from donations to final destinations. Every time a donor gala brought in a surge of gifts, a matching trickle appeared in the transfers list 2 weeks later. The sum total over 3 years was not a mistake. It was intention. I paused only once, at a line with June's name. Her entry was smaller than Clara's, labeled Artist Fellowship Support, a neat lie that would fool anyone who wanted to believe. June had always seemed like the child who wanted out. She talked more about community shows and tiny grants than about charity balls. The thought that her mother had used that very innocence as cover made my throat tight. The next morning, I called an old friend from a clinic that helped small charities stay compliant. I told her I was reviewing a report for a client and wanted to sanity check a pattern. I kept the names out of it and emailed a redacted extract. She called me back within an hour. "This reads like layering," she said. "You have the original inflow, then a pass-through to a service vendor, then into a beneficiary account. If the vendor is not real and the beneficiary is related to board members, it is major trouble." "What counts as proof?" I asked. "Chain of documents, routing numbers, anything that connects a signature to the decision. Emails are best. Internal memos are gold." Gold, there had to be gold somewhere. I went back to the network folder and searched by terms that would hide in plain sight. Sponsorship realignment, liquidity bridge, contingency draw, there it was. A memo from Miranda to the finance lead. Short, crisp, coded. Move the previously discussed allocation this Friday. Use vendor Larkspur for cover. Confirm with MR the initials were the tidy bow on the gift she thought no one would ever open. I took screenshots and saved the originals to an encrypted drive. I made a second copy in cloud storage and set a timed share link to a private email of mine. If anything happened to my laptop, the files would live without me. 2 days later, I met June for coffee. She chose a small cafe on a side street where the windows steamed from the cold and the barista wrote hearts in foam without asking. She wore a wool hat that swallowed half her head and an oversized coat that made her look like a student again. "How is work?" I asked. She shrugged. "Better when I forget what that house feels like." She smiled and added, "Sorry, that was blunt." "Honesty is a gift," I said. "Keep it." She studied me for a second, then leaned in. "Are you happy with Daniel?" she asked. I looked at my hands. "I am tired," I said. She nodded like she already knew. Then she told me she had applied to a real community arts program that did not require the Rowan name to open doors. She wanted to leave the family charity circuit for good. I was careful. "Has your mother ever asked you to sign anything for the foundation, for tax reasons or banking convenience?" Her brow creased. "Once. A generic document for a travel reimbursement way back when I helped with an event." "Why?" I held her gaze. "Be careful with what has been done in your name. And if anyone calls about an account that you do not recognize, do not answer alone. Call a lawyer first." Her mouth parted. "What is going on?" "I cannot say yet," I replied, which was both true and merciful. "But you deserve a life that is not built on someone else's staging." On my way home, I stopped at a quiet office building near the lake. A small firm there handled simple legal matters for small companies. The partner on duty that day was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a memory for case numbers. "I need advice on how to deliver evidence to authorities safely," I said, "and I want to ensure that I do not commit defamation by confronting a private individual with facts in a private setting." She listened without interrupting, then slid a legal pad across the desk. "Document a clean chain of custody. Date and time your exports. Keep originals untouched. Do not embellish. Do not speculate in writing. Deliver to a federal channel or through counsel. If you speak in private, stick to what you can show on paper. What if the person tries to buy silence?" She folded her hands. "Silence sold is still silence. If you want something better than silence, do not take the offer." I left with a folder of instructions and the name of a contact who could route materials to investigators if needed. The last piece arrived by accident. A junior accountant forwarded me an attachment by mistake while I was still on the internal email list for event vendors. It was a reconciliation sheet for year-end bonuses. The totals did not match the public report by a margin that could fund an entire shelter. At the bottom was a note: "Adjust June's fellowship in ledger. Use code Larkspur." I sat back in my chair and stared at the word. There was no universe in which this was a misunderstanding now. I printed the memo to a secure printer at a copy center and paid in cash. I bought a small silver box at a stationery shop down the block. It had a red ribbon that looked festive enough to be cruel. The night before Christmas Eve, I placed everything on our dining table. 2 stacks of paper, one clean and one highlighted. A short letter folded over a USB drive. The letter used no accusations. It only asked 3 questions and stated 3 lines of fact. Daniel came home late again. He was tired and distant and told me his mother had planned a small gift exchange before dessert. His voice softened when he said it, like a son giving in to gravity. "Do you want me there?" I asked. He looked surprised. "Of course," he said, and kissed my forehead like one might bless a stranger. I slept with the box on the nightstand and woke before dawn. The city had frozen under a thin, clear cold. Every roof wore a sheet of frost. Every street shone like glass. I made coffee and stood by the window while steam rose from the cup. My reflection looked steady. Not brave, not afraid, just ready. Around noon, I called Clara. I told her I had a question about a file name from the press kit and asked if she had a moment before the party. She said yes, distracted, and mentioned that their father had not been feeling well lately. The news sat in me like a stone and made me wish for a different road that still led to daylight. But there was only this road. I wrapped the box just before we left for the house. The ribbon lay perfectly across the lid. I tucked the letter under the papers in case words were required when voices failed. On the drive, Daniel played carols quietly. He tapped the steering wheel in time with the music. He did not ask what was in my bag. He did not hold my hand. The Rowan house rose from the hill like a photograph from an old magazine. Lights traced every eave. A wreath hung on the door like a promise. We stepped inside. Miranda greeted Daniel first with a kiss on the cheek. Then she turned to me, her smile gleaming and thin. "Hadley," she said, "I am so glad you could make it." I said thank you and handed her my coat. She passed it to a staff member without looking. People who perform warmth are good at passing things away from their hands. I went to the dining room and saw the table set in winter white. I took my place at the end and rested a palm on the bag at my feet. It felt like the only solid thing in the room. When Miranda raised her glass to toast family, I lifted mine a heartbeat after. When the gifts began, I watched her move down the line with her practiced grace. When she reached the last bag and laughed that sweet little laugh, I felt the room lean toward her like flowers lean toward the sun. Then I set my glass down and heard my own voice as if it came from a clear well. "It is all right," I said. "I brought something for you." I spent the following morning sitting at the kitchen table with the silver box in front of me. It looked harmless, small, elegant, almost beautiful. I wondered how something that pretty could carry so much weight. The documents inside were in perfect order now, labeled and arranged like a story waiting to be told. There was no chaos left to hide behind. Every wire transfer, every coded memo, every falsified receipt was printed, time-stamped, and backed by the data I had copied from Miranda's drive. I told myself I wasn't doing this for revenge. Revenge is for people who still want to be seen by the person who hurt them. I didn't. I only wanted the truth to stand in a room where no one could rewrite it. Daniel left early again. He kissed my cheek, said he had a meeting downtown, and asked if I wanted him to pick up wine for Christmas dinner. "Sure," I said. He smiled, relieved, as if that one word meant everything was normal again. After he left, I opened my laptop and reread my message to the lawyer. She had replied overnight. "Your materials are sufficient. Keep the originals in your possession until the appointed date. If you intend to confront the subject personally, make sure at least one digital copy is off-site." I had already done that. The files were backed up twice, one encrypted copy in the cloud, another on a flash drive hidden behind the lining of my wallet. Still, I hesitated. It wasn't fear of being caught. It was the fear of finally being free and realizing that once freedom came, nothing familiar would remain. That afternoon, I met with Clara at a cafe near her office. The air smelled like coffee beans and damp wool. She looked flawless as always, her lipstick precise, her voice light. "I'm so glad you texted," she said. "I was actually going to ask if you could help polish one of my client bios. They adore that soft tone you use." "Sure," I said and stirred my coffee slowly. "How, work with the foundation lately?" Her smile stiffened just a little. "Busy, Mother keeps changing everything. She says it's about transparency." She laughed, quick and hollow. "Honestly, I think she's preparing for another award." I nodded, feigning curiosity. "And how's June?" "She's doing her art thing." "You know June, always chasing some emotion." Clara leaned closer. "Mom worries about her, says she's not practical enough. I think she's just jealous that June doesn't care what people think." The words slipped out so easily, like truth escaping by accident. I realized then that Clara didn't know, not yet, that her own name was tied to the fraud, and I wondered what she would become when she did. We talked for another 20 minutes. She asked about Daniel, and I gave the same gentle answers I always did. "He's busy." When we stood to leave, she hugged me quick, perfunctory, the way people hug when they're already thinking about something else. As she walked away, I watched her blend into the crowd. It struck me that Miranda's cruelty had shaped them all differently. Clara had turned it into performance, June into rebellion, Daniel into silence. And me, I had turned it into a mission. That night I stayed awake sorting every folder again. I highlighted Miranda's personal emails, the ones where she wrote about adjustments, temporary relocations, strategic discretion. Each word was corporate camouflage for theft. I found one draft never sent. If the auditors question the Cayman allocations, remind them it's for foreign aid partnerships. Use the June profile as a face for outreach. People love her story. People love her story. Those 4 words stopped me cold. It wasn't just fraud. It was exploitation of her own child's identity for sympathy. The heater clicked on, filling the apartment with its dry hum. Outside, the city slept under drizzle. Inside, I felt something inside me lock into place. I printed the draft and slid it into the pile for the dinner. The weight of it made the stack slightly uneven, proof that truth is never perfectly balanced. At 2 a.m., I finally lay down beside Daniel. He stirred in his sleep, mumbling something about a client meeting. For a moment, I thought about waking him, showing him everything, giving him a chance to choose me before it was too late. But then I remembered how many times I had already waited for him to choose, and how the answer was always silence. So I turned away, closed my eyes, and let the hum of the heater drown out the last trace of hesitation. Tomorrow, I told myself, the story begins to end. Morning came slow and gray, the kind of light that makes everything look honest. I brewed coffee and read through the stack one more time. It felt like handling a small animal that trusted me. Do not drop this. Do not fail it. I needed one more safeguard. Not more files, not more screenshots, but someone outside the house who would not be persuaded by charm. Reporters had interviewed Miranda for years, always leaning into the angle of grace and leadership. I needed a different kind of reporter. I called a woman named Ria whom I had met at a panel about nonprofit accountability. She was the quiet kind who waited out long silences until people told the truth just to fill the air. When she answered, her voice carried the same calm I remembered. Ria, this is Hadley. We met at the Civic Center 2 summers ago. I have materials about a foundation that are not consistent with its public reports. I want to confirm the safest path to share them. You have originals? She asked. Yes, dated, backed up. Do you have a personal stake in this? She asked, not unkindly. Yes, I said, but the numbers stand without me. She gave me a time and a coffee shop 3 neighborhoods away. Bring only what you can lose, she said. Keep 1 copy with counsel. I packed a thin set of documents, the memo with Larkspur, and a version of the ledger that could tell the story at a glance. I wore an old coat and shoes that made no sound on tile. When I arrived, Ria was already there, hands wrapped around a paper cup, eyes clear as glass. I did not perform. I did not plead. I laid out the story in the order that money moves: donors to the foundation, foundation to shell vendor, vendor to beneficiary accounts that matched the names of family members. I pointed to the gaps between public reports and internal reconciliations. She did not look surprised. She looked patient. When I finished, she set her cup down and asked only 2 questions. Are you prepared for retaliation? Are you willing to be named if necessary? Retaliation felt like weather. You do not negotiate with weather, you dress for it. As prepared as I know how to be, I said. As for my name, I am willing if it protects the truth, but if the story can live without it, let it. She nodded. I will run this through an editor. I will not publish until you confirm delivery to authorities. I will also contact the program officers listed in the reports and ask for comment. If they lie, that is on record. I thanked her and slid the folder across the table. She did not promise outrage. She promised process. It felt like the first adult in the room had arrived. On the way home, I bought plain envelopes and a roll of red string. I labeled each envelope by category: transfers, memos, reconciliations. The string was not for show. It held the packets like a seam that would not unravel with the first tug. By evening, the apartment looked like a small newsroom. The silver box sat at the center, quiet and ready. I drafted a short note to accompany the USB inside. It contained 6 lines, dates, amounts, a question about ethics that could not be dodged with charm. Daniel texted that he would be late. I answered with a simple okay and returned to the work of closing the circle. Around 9, June called. She sounded breathless, as if she had run up a long flight of stairs. Did you mean what you said about calling a lawyer first? She asked. Yes, I said. What happened? Someone from the foundation left a message about updating my fellowship file. I never had a fellowship. I am not sure what they want me to sign. Do not sign, I said. Tell them you are reviewing your records and that all communication should go through email. That is the only place truth survives. She was quiet for a moment. Hadley, are you trying to protect me or destroy her? I am trying to stop a lie that uses your face as a mask, I said. If that destroys anything, it is the mask, not you. She let out a small sound that could have been a laugh or a sob. Thank you, she said, and hung up before I could say anything else. I sat there with the phone in my hand and realized my hands were steady. The fear that had lived under my ribs for years had nothing left to feed on. It had starved while I was busy counting. The next day, I met my lawyer in her narrow office with the view of the ferry. We prepared a packet for federal authorities and documented the chain of custody. She stamped the date in heavy ink. That sound, that simple thud, felt like a door locking behind me and another one opening ahead. Once we send this, she said, you do not control time anymore. You only control your behavior. Keep yours clean. On the way out, I stood on the sidewalk and watched a ferry move across the water. Its wake drew a white line that widened and widened until the surface smoothed out. Movement, then calm. I would take either. 2 days before the dinner, Miranda called again. Her voice was the softest I had ever heard it. Hadley, I would love it if you could sit next to Daniel at the table this year. I would hate for you to feel left out. I pictured the place cards, written in perfect curls. I pictured the way she would tilt her head and say words with a sweetness that made them stick in the throat. Thank you, I said. I will sit wherever you place me. When the call ended, I wrote her name on a card of my own. Miranda, it said. Under it, a single line. Numbers do not belong to you. I tucked the card into the silver box with the note and the USB. The lid closed with a soft click that sounded like a promise. That night, I cleaned the apartment. Not the nervous kind of cleaning that tries to avoid a thought, but the reverent kind that makes room for whatever comes. I folded 2 changes of clothes and placed them in a small bag. I packed my passport and my grandmother's ring and 1 book of poems that had survived every move I had ever made. Before sleep, I opened a blank document and wrote 3 sentences I wanted to remember at the table. Speak only when the paper can speak with you. Do not defend yourself against lies. Do not apologize for the truth. I slept without dreams. Christmas Eve arrived dressed in clear cold. I slipped the silver box into my bag and stood for a while at the window. The sky over the bay held a hard blue. Somewhere, a church bell counted the hour. In the mirror, I looked like myself, but taller. Not taller in inches, taller in intention. My voice felt like it fit my body for the first time in years. Daniel waited by the door with the keys in his hand. He smiled the tired smile I knew too well. Ready? He asked. I nodded and lifted the bag by its handles. The weight was right. It felt like carrying my name. In the car, he put on soft music. We said little. It was not silence, it was space. The road climbed the hill to the Rowan house. Lights shone through the trees like 1,000 small eyes. When we pulled into the drive, the house looked exactly as it always had, which was suddenly strange. I realized that every time I had walked through that door before, I had made myself smaller to fit. I did not do that this time. We crossed the threshold. Warmth and music and the smell of cinnamon rushed around us. The tree glittered in the corner. A staff member reached for my coat. I thanked her and kept the bag close. Miranda swept into the foyer with a smile bright enough to light a stage. She greeted Daniel, then touched my arm with the tips of her fingers. Hadley, she said, with a softness that could make a person forget their own name. You look lovely. I met her eyes and returned the smile she expected. Thank you, I said. Merry Christmas. And then I walked past her into the dining room, the bag at my side, the chair at the end of the table waiting. The silver forks were already in place. The napkins were folded like swans. I set the box on my lap and felt the quiet come to sit beside me like an old friend. When the gifts began and the laughter rose and the last velvet bag emptied without my name, I did not look away from the light. I lifted my glass. I set it down. I heard my voice. It is all right, I said. I brought something for you. The house smelled of pine and butter. Candles flickered in the tall holders along the dining table. Every sound, every movement carried the weight of ceremony. Miranda was radiant in emerald again, the color she favored when she wanted to look like authority disguised as grace. Clara and June chatted about travel plans, laughing a little too loudly. Daniel poured wine, his smile as practiced as theirs. I sat at the far end, my posture composed, my pulse steady. The silver box rested against my leg beneath the tablecloth. I could feel its corners pressing through the fabric, reminding me it was there. Dinner began with the same rhythm as every year. Miranda complimented the chef, corrected a centerpiece, and narrated every dish as if she had personally invented it. Her voice filled every gap in the conversation, and I let it. Silence is powerful when you choose it. She turned to Daniel halfway through the meal. You have been working too hard, she said, touching his wrist. Next year, promise me you'll spend more time at the lake house. He smiled faintly. We'll see. We, she repeated, teasing, or will Hadley allow it? The laughter that followed was soft and cruel. I smiled. I like the lake, it's quiet. Her eyes flicked to me, gauging, then moved on. We were nearing dessert when Miranda clapped her hands lightly. Well, she said, before we eat the pie, I have a small surprise. A servant brought a tray of red velvet gift bags tied with gold ribbons. She lifted them one by one, reading names aloud. Daniel, a watch; Clara, spa vouchers; June, diamond earrings; Harold, a book on history he'd mentioned months ago. She placed it in front of him with affection that looked real enough to sell tickets. When the last bag was gone, I looked around. My place was bare. Oh dear, she said, glancing at the tray. I seem to have miscounted. The table chuckled lightly, the sound rehearsed. Even Daniel smiled, though his eyes never reached mine. I lifted my glass, took a slow sip of wine, and set it down. It's all right, I said. I brought something for you. The room stilled. Miranda tilted her head. For me? Yes. I reached under the table, lifted the silver box, and placed it before her. It gleamed softly under the chandelier, catching the reflections of the ornaments above us. She laughed. How mysterious. Open it, I said. Daniel's hand tightened on his glass. Hadley? It's fine, I said without looking at him. She'll love it. Miranda untied the ribbon delicately as if she were unwrapping a secret. The paper fell away to reveal the stack of documents and the folded note on top. Her smile faltered. What is this? Proof, I said. For once, something genuine at this table. Her fingers twitched. I beg your pardon? Read it. She flipped through the first few pages, her nails clicking softly against the paper. The color drained from her face. Clara leaned forward. Mom, June frowned. What's going on? Daniel looked from me to his mother. Hadley, what are you doing? I'm just returning a favor, I said. You forgot me, I remembered you. Miranda's voice cracked like fine glass. This is absurd. These are confidential records. They were on a public drive, I said. You should be more careful where you hide your lies. A silence spread across the table, heavy and cold. Harold's fork paused midair. Clara's lips parted, but no sound came. June's hand trembled around her napkin. Miranda slammed the folder shut. You have no right? I have every right, I said. You've used the foundation to funnel donations into offshore accounts for years. You used your daughter's names to disguise transfers. Clara J. Rowan, June L. Rowan, you thought no one would ever look closely. Clara gasped. What? That's ridiculous, Miranda snapped. Those are stipends, legitimate compensations, for events that never happened, I said. I checked the contractor lists, the venues, the dates, they don't exist, you made them up. June's chair scraped against the floor. Mom, tell me she's lying. I am protecting this family, Miranda said. Everything I've done was to preserve what your father built. By stealing from donors? Clara shot back. By using our names? The sisters looked at her like strangers meeting for the first time. Daniel stood, his chair toppling behind him. Stop it, all of you, this is insane. I turned to him. No, Daniel, it's truth, you just don't like the way it sounds. Miranda's breath came fast, uneven. Do you think anyone will believe you? She said. You're bitter, you've always been jealous of this family. A bored little wife with too much time. Maybe, I said softly, but jealous wives don't come armed with bank statements. I took the USB from my bag and placed it beside her plate. Her eyes widened. That's the complete archive, I said, and one more thing, your correspondence with the auditors, the memo about using vendor Larkspur for cover, it's all there. Her mouth opened, but no words followed. Harold's hand twitched near his chest. The ticking of the clock filled the room like thunder. Daniel's voice was a whisper. What have you done? What she wouldn't, I said. Tell the truth. Harold pressed a napkin to his lips and tried to stand. The chair legs grated against the polished floor. He took one breath, then another, and then his hand rose to his chest as if to hold something in place that had already come loose. Dad, Daniel said, the word breaking in the middle. Harold wavered like a tree in a storm. The heavy book Miranda had given him slid from the table and thumped onto the rug. He bent forward, swayed, and fell. The crystal rattled. A candle guttered out. I was already moving. I knelt beside him, turned his head gently, and spoke close to his ear. Harold, listen to my voice. You are not alone. Keep breathing with me. June fumbled her phone, eyes wide, lips white. Emergency, she told the operator. My father collapsed. Chest pain. He is 68. Please hurry. Clara hovered behind Miranda, one hand on the back of a chair as if the furniture could keep her upright. Miranda stood frozen for a heartbeat, then sank to her knees in a cautious descent that looked like choreography. Harold, she said, and her voice became the kind of soft that photographs well. My love, stay with us. He blinked, pupils unfocused, breath shallow. I counted silently and watched his color. The room had shrunk to one square of floor and a circle of faces that could not agree on what kind of truth they were seeing. "Clear a path," I said. "Unlock the front door." Daniel stumbled to do it. His hands shook as he put the latch back. He turned and looked at me, grief already sharpening into rage. "This is your fault," he said, almost whispering. "You brought this into our house." I kept my eyes on Harold. "I brought paper," I said. "Your mother brought the rest." Sirens swelled outside, then cut off clean. The paramedics came like a wave breaking into order. They worked with speed that did not look rushed. Blood pressure, oxygen, a measured voice in Harold's ear. "Sir, stay with us. Count to 5 if you can." Miranda reached toward them and then stopped, unsure where to put her hands. "Please," she said, the word polished and empty. "He is everything." They lifted Harold to the stretcher. Clara pressed a shaking kiss to his forehead and stepped back as if the air itself had become glass. June cried without sound and wiped her cheeks with the heel of her hand. I stood, touched the side of the table to steady myself, and watched them take him through the door and down the steps into the cold night. The scent of pine rushed in and then was gone. When the door closed, the house tried to remember how to be beautiful. The tree glittered. The candles resumed their tremble, but the room no longer believed its own performance. Daniel turned on me. "What kind of person waits for Christmas Eve to do this?" he said. "If you had any decency, you would have come to me first, not humiliate my mother, not in front of him." I picked up the fallen book and set it on the table, closing it gently. "I came to you for 6 years," I said. "I came to you with smaller truths over and over. Every time they came back dressed in your mother's vocabulary. What I said became unkind. What she did became complicated. The house swallowed it and called it manners." "You could have waited," he said. "Waiting is what kept the room golden while it rotted," I said. Clara stepped between us. Her voice was low, clear, dangerous. "Did you do it, Mom?" Miranda smoothed her dress as if perfect lines could bring back command. "I moved funds temporarily during a market shock," she said. "Everything was for the health of the foundation, for this family." "Then why use my name?" Clara asked. "Why use June?" Miranda opened her mouth, closed it. Her hands found a napkin and began to fold it into a brutal little square. "You girls would never have been touched by any of it," she said. "It was only paper." June stared at her. "I am not paper," she said softly. No one spoke after that. We heard the clock tick. We heard the house settle on its beam of comfort and decide it could not carry us anymore. I picked up the USB and the folder and slid them back into the silver box. Miranda watched me with a look that finally admitted fear. "What do you want?" she asked. "Money, an apology, a seat at this table. Tell me the price." I shook my head. "Truth is not a ransom," I said. "You cannot buy it back once it learns how to stand." She tried one more smile. It broke at the edges. "You will regret this," she whispered. "Perhaps," I said, "but not tonight." We went to the hospital in separate cars. In the fluorescent light of the waiting area, the world returned to plain language. No chandeliers, no crystal, just hard chairs and a vending machine that hummed like a tired animal. Clara and June sat together, small again, human again. Daniel paced a short line in front of the nurse's station, then sank into a chair and pressed both palms over his eyes. Miranda stood apart, back straight, a statue of a saint who had not earned the title. Every few minutes she fixed her hair with 2 fingers and checked her reflection in the dark window. When a doctor finally came, he spoke to us the way doctors do when they carry a candle into a storm. "He is stable for now," the doctor said. "We will monitor him overnight." He asked for quiet. He asked that everyone tell the truth from here on. The words rang through me like a bell in a stone room. He asked that everyone tell the truth. Clara nodded, tears bright and honest. June wiped her face and thanked the doctor with a voice that belonged to a better world. Miranda exhaled a perfect breath. "How wonderful," she said, as if the word could erase gravity. Then she looked at me and found the one expression she had not prepared for. My face did not offer her hate or shock or triumph. It offered the end of a performance. Daniel approached me slowly. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," I said, "you decide which room you want to live in, the one that looks beautiful or the one that is true." He closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the wall. "I do not know how to choose." "You do," I said. "You always did, you just did not like the cost." I walked to the window and watched our reflections shimmer over the parking lot lights. Somewhere beyond the glass, a siren moved past and took its noise with it. I thought of the dinner table, of the way the wine spread across the papers like winter roses. I thought of the small silver box on the chair beside me, and of the way it had felt against my leg for hours, warm from my skin, patient as a kept promise. When I turned back, Miranda had resumed her stance near the plant, hands folded, eyes distant, like a portrait hung slightly crooked. Clara and June were speaking in low voices about practical things. Daniel stared at the floor and tried to measure a life without a script. I sat down, folded my coat over my knees, and let the quiet fill me without asking permission. I did not feel victorious. Victory belongs to games. This was not a game anymore. This was a house learning how to tell the truth. This was a woman remembering her own name. The morning after the dinner, silence had a different texture. It wasn't the soft, easy kind that used to sit in our kitchen between Daniel and me. It was a silence that tasted like metal, heavy, sharp, alive. I woke up to a dim gray light pressing through the curtains. Daniel wasn't in bed. For a moment, I thought he'd gone to the hospital early, but then I heard the sound of the kettle and the faint scrape of a chair. He was in the kitchen, waiting. When I walked in, he didn't look up. The coffee mug in front of him had gone cold. His phone lay on the counter beside it, dark screen reflecting his hand. He had been sitting there a long time. "Any updates from the hospital?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was dull, the way voices sound when they've run out of arguments. "He's stable. They're keeping him for observation." I nodded, waiting for the next sentence. It came quietly. "Mom isn't talking to anyone." I sat down opposite him. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. The quiet stretched until it felt like glass between us. "Do you think I wanted this?" I said. He exhaled, slow and heavy. "I think you wanted something to break. Maybe you didn't know how much." His words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they weren't entirely wrong. I wanted the illusion to shatter, but I hadn't expected the sound to echo that far. He rubbed his temples. "The board's already talking about freezing her position. Reporters are calling. Clara says some donors have started pulling their pledges. So they're finally seeing her for what she is," I said. "Or for what you made her look like," he replied. He looked up now, his eyes tired and bloodshot. "She's my mother, Hadley." "And Harold's your father," I said. "The man who almost died trying to live inside her lies. Where does that leave you?" He stared at me for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the sink, gripping the edge of the counter. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe nowhere." He poured the cold coffee down the drain. The sound was final. By afternoon, the storm had spread. A reporter called my office line, asking for comment on an anonymous leak from within the foundation. Ria had kept her promise, no names, just evidence. The article went live within hours. Exclusive: documents suggest financial misconduct at the Rowan Foundation. It was written in careful language, the kind that wounds politely. Miranda's portrait from a past gala gleamed at the top of the page, pearls, poise, and all. Beneath it, the words, "Preliminary investigation pending." Family sources declined to comment. I stared at the screen until the text blurred. The truth had finally stepped into daylight, but it didn't look heroic. It looked exhausted. The phone rang again, Clara. Her voice cracked before the first sentence finished. "They're tearing everything up." Reporters at the gate, staff quitting, donors panicking. "What did you do?" "What your mother forced me to," I said. "She's losing everything." "She stole everything," I replied. "She just finally ran out of places to hide it." "She's still our mother," Clara said, her voice smaller now. "Yes," I said quietly, "and that's the saddest part." The line went dead. I went to the hospital that evening. The corridors smelled of antiseptic and old air. Harold's room was dim, machines blinking like patient stars. He was awake, pale, a thin blanket drawn up to his chest. When he saw me, he smiled faintly, a real smile, not the kind that performs. "I thought you might come," he said. His voice was soft but steady. "How are you feeling?" "Alive," he said with a small laugh that turned into a cough. "That seems to surprise everyone." I pulled the chair closer. "They're saying you knew," I said gently. He shook his head. "Not the details." But I knew something was wrong. The money never matched the stories. He sighed, eyes wandering toward the window. "I should have asked sooner. I didn't want to believe what asking might cost." The words sank into me like cold water. I understood him too well. He turned his gaze back to me. "She hates you now," he said. "I know. But she fears you too," he added, a hint of pride in his voice. "And that's something she's never done with anyone." We sat in quiet for a while, the steady beep of the monitor marking time. Then he said, almost as if to himself, maybe this family needed someone willing to stop pretending. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say that could fit inside a sentence. When I left the room, I passed Miranda in the hallway. Her coat was draped over her shoulders, her hair perfectly pinned, her expression composed. But up close I could see the cracks, the tiny tremors around her mouth, the faint smear of mascara near her eye. She stopped in front of me. "You did this," she said quietly. "You destroyed this family." I looked at her calm, steady. No, Miranda, I just refused to build on rot. For a heartbeat, I thought she might slap me. Instead, she smiled a slow, strange smile that had no warmth at all. You think you've won, she said, but you've only made room for emptiness. That's what truth does, Hadley. It takes everything. Maybe, I said, but at least it leaves the air clean. I walked past her, feeling the weight lift with every step. Behind me, her heels clicked once on the tile, then stopped. That night, I stood by the window in our apartment, watching the city lights pulse in the fog. The air outside was cold, bright, alive. Inside, everything was still. The phone buzzed once, a message from Ria. The department confirmed receipt of all materials. Case file officially opened. I closed my eyes and exhaled. The story was no longer mine to carry. But somewhere deep down, beneath the exhaustion, beneath the ache, I knew the collapse wasn't over. Truth never ends neatly. It ends like a wave, crashing, retreating, and then returning again, reshaped by what it's destroyed. And somewhere, Miranda Rowan was already planning her next tide. The next morning began without sound. No cars outside, no kettle, no footsteps. The apartment felt hollow, like it had been emptied of everything that used to matter. Daniel had left before dawn. His side of the bed was cold. A note lay on the counter beside a mug that still smelled faintly of coffee. I need space. Don't call me. Don't come to the house. I'll take care of Dad until things calm down. There were no apologies, no anger, just distance written in neat blue ink. I folded the note and slipped it into the drawer without reading it twice. When I opened my phone, every headline carried her name. Rowan Foundation under investigation for financial misconduct. Charity icon faces federal scrutiny. Exclusive. Evidence suggests embezzlement within family-run nonprofit. Each article used a different photo of Miranda. In every one, she was smiling, surrounded by flowers, lights, or handshakes. The captions spoke of grace under pressure, a legacy in question. No one ever called her a thief. They didn't have to. The photographs carried their own confession. Ria sent me a short message that morning. It started, "They'll subpoena her accounts by Monday. Stay quiet." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed thank you and deleted it before sending. By noon, the apartment had become unbearable. I went out walking in the cold, letting the wind cut through my coat. The city was alive with its own business: delivery trucks, schoolchildren, the smell of roasted chestnuts near the corner. No one cared about the Rowan Foundation out here. It was just another story on a screen. I like that. At a small park near the water, I sat on a bench and watched gulls dive into the gray surf. I thought of June, of her shy smile, her hands always covered in paint. She hadn't called since that night. I didn't blame her. The truth frees some people and freezes others. Maybe she needed time to thaw. My phone rang again. Clara, her voice trembled when she spoke. "She's on television, right now. You should see it." I found the nearest cafe, ordered nothing, and watched the muted screen above the counter. Miranda sat before a backdrop of bookshelves, perfectly dressed, eyes glistening just enough to seem human. The subtitle read "Miranda Rowan addresses allegations." The sound was low, but I could read her lips. She spoke of misunderstanding, of clerical errors, of a malicious internal leak timed to damage the family. She said her heart ached for her husband's condition and that her only wish was to protect the foundation's mission. The anchor nodded sympathetically. The camera framed her face like a painting. People around me murmured softly. No one noticed me sitting there, watching the woman who had built her world on words now twisting them again, even as it collapsed. When the segment ended, I walked out into the street. My reflection followed me in every shop window, same face, same eyes, but steadier now. That evening, I visited the hospital again. The hall outside Harold's room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines. Daniel sat by his father's bedside, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. He didn't move when I stepped in. "She's doing interviews," I said quietly. He nodded without looking up. "I saw. She says it's all lies." "And what do you think?" He finally turned to me. "I think truth isn't what I thought it was. It doesn't feel like victory, it just feels empty." "It's not supposed to feel good," I said. "It's supposed to feel clean." He gave a tired laugh. "Clean, that's one word for it." Harold stirred in his bed, eyes fluttering open. His voice came weak but clear. "Let it go," he whispered. "Don't let her drag you into the mud with her." Daniel looked at his father, and something in his face softened for the first time. He reached out, touched Harold's hand, and nodded. When I left the hospital, snow had started to fall. The city glowed under it, quiet and almost forgiving. I walked slowly, letting the flakes settle on my hair, melt against my skin. Each step felt lighter than the last. At home, I packed a small suitcase, just clothes, notebooks, and a folder of untouched papers. I left the wedding ring on the kitchen counter beside Daniel's note. It looked small there, like a circle finally learning how to close. Before I turned off the lights, I wrote one message to him. When the noise fades, you'll remember what it feels like to breathe. I hope that's enough. Take care of him. Take care of yourself. Then I left the apartment. The night air smelled of rain and snow. I walked without destination until the city lights gave way to silence. Somewhere behind me, in a house full of cameras and broken mirrors, Miranda Rowan was still performing. And somewhere ahead, in the vast quiet, there would be no audience, only truth, and the long, slow work of rebuilding what it had taken to reach it. I pulled my coat tighter, turned my collar up, and kept walking toward the place where the horizon met the dark. I checked into a small hotel near the market, the kind that smells faintly of old wood and lemon cleaner. The clerk slid a keycard toward me and did not ask why my suitcase was light or why my eyes were heavier. In the room, I set the case on the chair, opened the curtains, and let the city fill the glass. I could see the bay from there, a gray plate under a gray sky. I stood and watched until the quiet inside me matched the quiet outside. In the morning, I made tea from a paper packet and read the news without sound. The foundation had gone dark. Comments were disabled on every post. A statement from the board said they were conducting a review with an independent firm. My phone lit with messages I did not open. The names were familiar, the intentions were not. At 10, I met my lawyer. Her office had a window that framed the ferry route like a painting. She greeted me with a nod and placed a thin folder on the table between us. "We filed the packet yesterday afternoon," she said. "There will be interviews. Some will be formal. Some will feel friendly. Remember that friendliness is a tool when truth costs money." I smiled without joy. "I will remember." She studied me. "And your marriage?" I folded my hands. I left the ring on the counter. She waited. People who work with hard endings learn to leave room for air. "I am not leaving to be dramatic," I said. "I am leaving because I cannot carry both the truth and the house that hates it." She nodded. "We can start proceedings when you say. There is no advantage to waiting unless you want to see if he chooses to stand with you." "I have seen enough of his choices," I said. "Start." We signed 3 forms. She slid them back into the folder with a soft tap that sounded like an answer. I thanked her and walked out into a day that smelled like rain. June called while I was on the sidewalk. The call came through with a rush of street noise and breath. "Where are you?" she asked. "In the city. Can I see you?" We met at a bakery that sold bread dark with seeds. She sat across from me with her hands around a warm cup as if it might anchor her. "I went to the office," she said. "They wanted me to sign a declaration that I had received a fellowship payment last year. They said it would help reconcile an audit." She looked at me, eyes bright and hurt. "I never received anything. I paid my own rent with a credit card and sold a painting to buy a space heater." "I am sorry," I said. She shook her head. "Do not be sorry for telling me. Be sorry that I wanted to believe she loved me." I let the words sit. They were too true to speak over. "I told them I would not sign," she said. "I told them to send everything by email." A faint smile crossed her face. "Your rules, they felt like a backbone when mine was made of string." I felt something unclench. "I am proud of you," I said. We ate in small bites and said little, the way people do when the words have already been spent on the same wound all morning. When we stood to leave, June hugged me. It was not perfunctory. It had weight. "I do not know where any of this ends," she said into my shoulder. "Ends are just turns," I said. "Walk the turn you can see." Back at the hotel, I found an email from Harold. The subject line was a single word: "Thank you." I opened it and read a few sentences typed slowly and carefully. He said the doctors wanted him to rest. He said he had spoken to a lawyer about the accounts he and Miranda shared. He said he had not decided what to do about his marriage, but that he would no longer permit lies to be the house language. It was the most hopeful note I had read in years, and it hurt. In the afternoon, Daniel texted for the first time since the night I left. He asked where I was. I told him the neighborhood and added nothing else. He replied that he wanted to talk. His words wore no anger, no charm, just fatigue. We met in a public garden carved into the side of a hill. The paths were slick with last night's rain and the benches were damp along their edges. He wore the same coat from the dinner, the one that still smelled like smoke from a candle that went out too quickly. He sat beside me and stared down at his hands. "I saw the interview," he said. I did not recognize her voice. It sounded like a recording she plays when the world is watching. Maybe that voice is the only one she has left. I waited. "I keep wanting to defend her," he said. "The memory of her, I mean, the person who taught me to count to 10 and told me the names of birds. but when I do, I end up defending the crimes of the current woman who wears her face. I cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. Maybe they never were separate, I said. Maybe the kindness was real and the cruelty was real, and the house called both of them love because it did not want to think too hard. He breathed out. You left the ring. Yes. He nodded as if confirming a weather report. Are you sure? I am sure. He looked at me then, really looked, the way people do when they know a page has turned and there is no way to press it flat again. I did not stand up for you, he said. I thought peace was silence. I thought love was the absence of conflict. I learned that avoidance and loyalty can wear the same suit. Loyalty to what? I asked. To a person or to their comfort. He closed his eyes. To comfort, he whispered. Always to comfort. We sat with that for a while. A child ran down the path and laughed. Somewhere a dog barked twice and then decided it was enough. I am starting therapy, he said. I do not say that as currency. I say it because I cannot live like this and tell myself I am a good man. That is the first true sentence I have heard from you in months, I said. Keep saying it in rooms where no one applauds. He swallowed. If I ask you to wait for me, will you? I turned the questions over in my mind like stones in a pocket. They were smooth from use and did not change shape. No, I said. Waiting is the old religion. I am done praying to it. He nodded. He did not cry. He did not beg. He looked like a person sitting through a storm because they did not build a shelter when the sky warned them for years. I will sign whatever you need, he said. I will not fight you. I will not speak poorly of you to anyone. Thank you, I said. That is a kindness I will remember. He stood and put his hands in his coat pockets. My father wants to talk to you when he is stronger. Tell him I will come, I said. We walked down the path together and then split at the gate, each taking a street that curved in a different direction. The city did not notice. It rarely does. Back in the room, I lay on the bed and watched the ceiling fan turn its patient circles. I thought of the first year of my marriage, of the small apartment with bad light and good mornings, of the way Daniel had once laughed bare and unguarded. I wondered whether that boy still lived somewhere under the man who learned to flinch when truth raised its voice. Near dusk, I went to the water. The wind was sharp, the waves low and stubborn. I sat on a bench and wrote 3 letters in a plain notebook. One to myself, promising not to mistake quiet for love again. One to June, telling her the way through a dark room is to keep a hand on the wall and move slowly. One to the woman I had once wanted Miranda to be, releasing her from the work of saving my life. As the light thinned, a message arrived from Clara. She said the board had voted to suspend Miranda and to freeze executive transactions. She said donors were asking for audits and that staff were telling stories that had never been safe to tell. She said she felt angry and clean at the same time and did not know what to do with that combination. I wrote back that anger is a broom and cleanliness is a floor and that both have work to do before a house can be a home. Later, I bought a simple dinner and ate it by the window. On the street below, a couple walked arm in arm with their heads bent together against the wind. They moved like a single idea. I did not envy them. I wished them well and then turned off the lamp. In the dark, the bay held a thin band of silver where the moon insisted on being seen. I lay there and listened to the soft sounds of the old building. Pipes, footsteps, a laugh, life going on. For the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without bracing for a voice to tell me who to be in the morning. The next morning, the rain stopped. Sunlight touched the window for the first time in weeks, pale but deliberate. I woke before the alarm and lay still, watching how it painted the edges of the curtains. For a long time, I simply breathed. No voices, no footsteps, no pretending, just air, honest and cold. Downstairs, the cafe opened early. I ordered tea and a piece of bread and sat by the window. People outside hurried to work, carrying their small purposes like torches. I wondered if any of them had ever broken their lives on purpose just to see what might grow from the pieces. Probably not. Most people repair the cracks before the light can get in. Ria called around noon. Her tone was steady, almost gentle. They've filed formal charges, she said. Wire fraud, misuse of charitable funds. It'll take months to process, but it's moving fast. I nodded even though she couldn't see it. And the board? They've frozen all activity until the audit's complete. A few employees came forward with statements. You started something larger than you think. I didn't answer right away. My chest tightened, not from regret, but from something quieter, heavier, grief for a world that had never been true yet had still felt like home. Thank you, I said finally, for everything. Don't thank me, she replied. You did the hard part. You kept standing when it got ugly. Most people sit down. After the call, I walked to the pier. The tide was high and restless. Waves slapped against the wood like applause that didn't know if it was for triumph or loss. I sat on a bench and watched the ferries slide across the gray distance. Each one left a trail of white that widened, faded, then disappeared. Every truth does that. It burns bright for a moment, then leaves the water quiet again. In the afternoon, I visited Harold one last time. He looked stronger, color returning to his face. A small radio on the nightstand played old jazz softly, the kind of music that knows how to forgive. "You look like someone who's finally slept," he said. "I have," I said, "not much, but enough." He smiled. "The papers came this morning, the foundation's done, the lawyers are circling her now." "Do you hate her?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, hate is another kind of devotion. I've given her enough of those." He reached for my hand, his skin warm and dry. "You did what I should have done years ago. Don't let guilt steal that from you." I felt my eyes sting. "I didn't want to hurt anyone." "You didn't," he said softly. "You only turned on the lights." When I left the room, the nurse smiled at me as if she somehow knew. I carried that look with me down the hallway and out into the afternoon. The following day, Daniel called. His voice was quieter than before, stripped of armor. "Dad's coming home next week. He wants you to visit when he's ready." "I will," I said. "I filed the papers this morning," he continued. "For the divorce." I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. "Thank you." "I wanted to tell you in person," he said, "but I thought maybe hearing it would be easier." "I appreciate that." He hesitated. "You were right about everything," he said finally. "About her, about me, I kept confusing peace with obedience. I won't do that again." "That's good," I said. "Don't waste it." He almost laughed. "You really are free now, aren't you?" "Yes," I said quietly. "And it's strange. Freedom doesn't feel like flying. It feels like standing still for the first time." There was nothing left to add. We said goodbye like two people acknowledging a past tense that used to be love. Days passed. The world kept moving. The headlines faded under newer scandals, fresher disasters. I found a small apartment near the pier with tall windows and a slanted floor. Every morning, I wrote for 2 hours. Sometimes it was fragments of memory. Sometimes it was fiction that smelled too much like truth. Words became the place where I lived without being seen. One evening, June visited. She looked older, though only weeks had passed. She brought a small canvas with her, a painting of the sea at night, moonlight breaking through thick clouds. She placed it on the table between us. "It's called Aftermath," she said. "I sold 2 others already. People seem to like the quiet in them." "It's beautiful," I said. She smiled. "So are you, not the way people mean it, the way a storm is after it's done. The air's clear and nothing pretends anymore." I laughed softly. That's the kindest thing anyone said to me in months. When she left, the apartment smelled faintly of paint and salt. I hung the canvas above my desk. It fit perfectly. That night I wrote a short piece for myself, no title, no audience. The hardest part of telling the truth isn't the speaking. It's what comes after when silence asks what you're going to do with it, and you realize the answer is simple. You live. Outside, the city breathed. Lights moved on the water. Somewhere far away, Miranda Rowan was learning what it meant to be small in a world that no longer believed her. I didn't wish her suffering. I only wished her honesty. That was enough. When I finally went to bed, I left the window open. The wind slipped through the curtains, cold but clean. The room smelled like salt and night and the first faint trace of peace. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of being someone else. I dreamed of the sea, and it was calm. 1 year later, the morning felt like a clean sheet of paper. Portland woke under a pale sky and the smell of rain that had not fallen yet. I stood at my kitchen window with a mug of coffee and watched the street below stretch itself awake. A cyclist passed with a basket of bread. A dog pulled a sleepy owner toward the park. The light along the rooftops softened from gray to a quiet gold. My apartment was small and kind. The floor leaned a little, and the windows were taller than they needed to be. I had painted the walls a soft white and hung June's canvas above my desk. The sea at night, moonlight pushing through a stubborn sky. It was the first thing I saw when I sat down to work and the last thing I saw before I slept. I named my studio Clearfield, a simple office on the second floor of an old brick building, 2 rooms and a plant I kept forgetting to water. I worked with women who were starting over, a bakery that hired people after prison, a clinic that rebuilt trust one appointment at a time, a housing nonprofit run by a woman who knew every tenant by name. We wrote quietly. We did not perform. We told the truth the way a person tells you their address. Plain, precise, useful. On the day the city finally decided it was spring, I unlocked the office early and opened both windows. Air moved through the rooms and lifted the corner of a stack of proofs. The plant forgave me and looked greener than it had a week ago. I answered 3 emails, approved a newsletter draft, and then paused at a name in my inbox that I had not seen in months. Ria. Her note was short. The case had closed. The foundation would be folded into a larger network under a court-appointed monitor. Miranda had accepted a plea agreement that admitted misconduct and barred her from managing charitable funds. The numbers were dull and final. There was no triumph in them, only completion. I typed 2 sentences back. Thank you for staying steady. The water is quiet now. Around noon, I met a client at a corner cafe. She ran a shelter and wanted help explaining the boring miracle of monthly budgets to donors who only liked dramatic stories. We sat by the window with a ledger printout between us and circled the line items that no one wants to sponsor. Trash pickup, flu shots, a plumber who answers at midnight. I wrote a paragraph that made those lines feel like the floor of a house and watched relief ease her shoulders. When we finished, she asked me how I had learned to write like that. By losing a script, I said. She laughed and nodded like she did not need me to explain. Back at the office, the afternoon turned to a deeper gold. A storm had moved through the forecast but changed its mind and drifted north. I turned off my phone and wrote a page for myself. No title, no addressee, just the facts of a day I had earned. At 5, I walked home. The sidewalks glistened from an earlier sprinkle. A mother and her child drew chalk stars on the dry parts of the pavement. A bus hissed and sighed at the corner, then shouldered its way into traffic. I loved the sound of a city on the good kind of ordinary day. It said keep going without needing to say anything. In the mailbox downstairs, I found a letter from Harold. His handwriting came in careful squares. He wrote that he had moved to a small house near a lake, the real one, not the one that was once an alibi. He had taken up walking at sunrise. He said the light on the water made him feel like God had not given up on mornings. He enclosed a photograph of the dock and a dog he had adopted from a shelter. The dog looked like Patience on 4 legs. I put the photo on my kitchen shelf next to a jar of sea glass. There was also an email from Daniel. The subject line was an apology without the word. He wrote that he had finished therapy for the year and was beginning to understand the kind of silence he had worshipped. He had moved to a smaller apartment and had learned how to cook 3 meals that did not come from his mother's favorites. He said he hoped I was well. He said he was sorry he had never learned to stand beside me when the room insisted on its performance. He did not ask to meet. He did not ask for anything. The letter did not need a reply, and I did not send one. I let it be what it was, a clean edge on a page. That evening, I sat at my desk facing June's painting and opened a new document. The blog for my studio had a simple heading and no comments. I liked it that way. I wrote about truthful messaging for small organizations. I wrote about the courage of budgets. I wrote about how the words you use to describe a house can either make a door or a lock. I wrote a sentence that sounded like a bell in an empty church. Do not sell shimmer when a beam is what keeps the roof from falling. I stopped there and saved the draft. Outside my window, the light thinned to the blue that tells the street it is time to go home. I made soup and ate it standing at the counter. I washed the bowl and left it upside down to dry. These were small things and they were large. On my nightstand, I kept 3 books. Poems. A slender biography of a woman who built a school in a basement. A second-hand copy of a novel that smelled faintly of someone else's attic. I read 2 pages from each and then turned off the lamp. Sleep came without ceremony. No dreams of arguments I needed to win, no heavy doors that would not open, just water and the sound it makes when it finds a shore. In the morning, the city was washed and ready. I walked to the office along a street that had learned my name. The bakery handed me coffee and a small pastry unasked, a habit that felt like friendship. At my desk, I opened the calendar and saw a note I had made a month earlier. Museum opening at 6. New community art space. Free admission. Bring someone. I smiled at the last instruction. I went alone but did not feel solitary. The museum had repainted a warehouse and hung local work in the long white rooms. Teenagers with paper badges explained the exhibits in practiced voices. Musicians tested a few notes on a small stage and then put their instruments down to wander the halls. Halfway through the main gallery, I saw a canvas that stopped me. The ocean again, not June's exact style, but a relative to it. Thick strokes where the sky carries more than it can hold. A steady line of horizon that did not waver under the weight. I stood with my hands at my sides and felt the quiet become a part of me. A woman stepped beside me and mirrored my stance. She had a program folded in half and paint on the cuff of her sleeve. She did not speak. We looked together. 2 strangers agreeing without a word on the worth of a moment. I moved on, room to room, until the evening opened into that last soft hour museums sometimes hold for people who do not want to leave. I reached the final corridor and heard a voice behind me say my name. Not a question, not a warning, just the sound of someone who remembered. Hadley. I turned and saw June at the far end of the hall. Her hair was shorter and darker, her face thinner and clearer than the last time. She wore a black dress that had pockets and a pair of sensible shoes that made her look like herself. She did not rush. She did not pretend this was a coincidence she had not planned. She walked toward me like you walk toward a friend on a train platform you were sure you would miss. We stopped an arm's length apart. For a moment neither of us spoke. The museum around us hummed with closing sounds. A guard checked a watch. Somewhere a door met its frame with a soft click that sounded like permission. "You look well," she said. "So do you," I said. She smiled, small and real. "I run programming here now, community workshops, open studio nights. We finally have a budget that is honest and a roof that does not leak." I laughed before I could help it. "That is all anyone really wants." "It is," she said. And then she reached into her bag and took out a small envelope. "I made this for you. I was going to mail it. But the mail would have been slower than tonight. I did not open it yet." I tucked it into my coat and nodded. "Thank you." We walked to the lobby together, not touching, matching pace. The air smelled like sawdust and new paint, Hope's favorite perfume. Outside the doors, the night had begun its soft claim on the street. Neon signs woke. A bus pulled up inside. Footsteps passed and faded. June looked at me and I saw a reflection of the year in her eyes. Loss and work and the kind of peace that does not argue. I thought of the first day we met for coffee, when she could not name what was being taken from her. I thought of the message she had left on my phone the night before she refused to sign. "You are free now," she said. I nodded. "So are you?" We did not hug. We did not make a promise that would turn into an apology later. We stood there with our hands in our pockets and let the quiet say the last necessary thing. "Be well." She turned left and I turned right. The envelope was light in my coat and heavy in my chest. I walked 2 blocks before I opened it under a streetlight. Inside was a small print of a new painting, the sea at morning, a thin bright line where the sun meets the edge of the world. On the back she had written 3 words, "Keep the light." I walked home under a sky rinsed clean. The rain had come and gone, leaving the pavement dark and soft. My breath rose in small clouds. The painting in my coat pocket shifted with each step, brushing against my side like a pulse. I took the long route along the waterfront, past the food stalls and the boats that rocked gently in their slips. The air smelled of salt and diesel and something faintly sweet, the scent of bakeries closing for the night. When I reached my building, I climbed the stairs instead of taking the elevator. My key turned smoothly in the lock. The apartment greeted me with its quiet. I set the painting on the desk beside June's sea at night and stood for a long time looking at the two of them together. Night and morning, dark and light, the same ocean learning how to begin again. I poured a glass of water and sat by the window. The streetlights shimmered through a thin fog, making halos around passing cars. Somewhere below, a bus sighed, brakes whispering against the wet asphalt. It was the kind of ordinary music that had once felt unreachable. I realized then that this was what peace sounded like, not silence, but life without performance. I opened my notebook, the same one I had carried through every meeting, every plan, every unraveling. Its pages were almost full now. The first line I ever wrote in it came back to me. "I am tired of stories that hide behind their own perfection." I smiled and wrote beneath it, "And I am done hiding too." For a while, I let myself drift through small memories, the taste of wine at that long table, the feel of paper under my fingers, the moment Miranda's mask cracked and she realized the room no longer belonged to her. I thought of Daniel's voice at the garden, of the way his confession had sounded like rain after drought. None of it hurt anymore. It was part of the soil now, feeding the roots of whatever came next. I closed the notebook, leaned back, and looked out at the faint reflection of myself in the glass. Not the woman who wanted to be accepted, not the woman who endured, but the woman who spoke. The one who stayed standing when the lights went out. A soft knock startled me. When I opened the door, a delivery man stood there with a small parcel and a polite smile. "For Ms. Peters," he said. "No sender listed." The box was light. Inside was a letter folded around a small envelope. No signature, just handwriting I recognized, Clara's. "I don't know if you'll want to read this, but I think you should know." Mom took the plea. She'll do 18 months, maybe less. She says she's writing a book about resilience. I'm not angry anymore. I just hope she learns what the word means. Dad's better. June visits often. Daniel keeps the old house quiet, just enough to breathe. We're all learning how to exist without pretending. Thank you for that. At the bottom, she had drawn a small heart, not sentimental, just an anchor on paper. I placed the letter beside June's print and felt something in me loosen, like the last knot untied from a rope that had been holding for too long. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. I made tea, the kind I used to drink before everything, and sat down to watch the first faint light rise beyond the buildings. The sky turned from navy to pearl. The city shifted, stretched, and came alive again. I could hear footsteps on the street, laughter, a door closing somewhere below. The kettle hissed softly behind me and I let it. I opened a new document on my laptop. The cursor blinked in an empty space that no longer felt threatening. It began with a dinner and ended with daylight. Sometimes truth burns, but it leaves warmth behind. If you are reading this, wherever you are, let the fire come. It only hurts until you see clearly. I saved it under the name The Quiet Morning. Outside, the sun finally broke through, striking the edges of the glass until the whole window glowed. I stood and lifted June's painting to the light. The pale horizon shimmered exactly the way the real one did now, fragile, steady, endless. The world had not forgiven itself yet, but it was trying. So was I. I set the painting down, opened the window, and let the air in. It smelled of the sea again, faint and clean. Somewhere far away, a bell rang from the harbor, marking a new hour. I breathed in once, deeply, and smiled. It was not a grand ending. It was better than that. It was life continuing, quiet, honest, and awake.